This episode is brought to you by Word Realms, the RPG where words are your weapons. Visit wordrealms.com to check it out. I don't think you're ready for the jelly.
It's fine. I don't need to be ready for it.
I question your jelly preparedness.
I mean, what's going to happen to me if I'm not ready for that jelly? What's the worst that could happen?
I can't remember...
On this day, and this week, and this year, what is the worst that can happen to me if I'm not ready for that jelly?
I can't remember what Beyonce hypothesizes will be the outcome of your...
If you game out whether or not you're ready for the jelly, what are the...
I don't know if... Beyonce. I don't think you're ready for this jelly.
Games, video 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 games, video. Video games.
It's June 6, 2013.
And this is Idle Thumbs 109. I'm Chris Remo.
I'm Nick Brecken.
And I'm Sean Vanneman.
And none of us is Jake Rodkin.
For the first time?
The first time ever. I had had my first not on Idle Thumbs moment like a month ago when you guys were in Britain. Mm-hmm. And now Jake...
Well, everybody has to have their time, I guess.
Yeah.
No,
it's like when Cal Ripken decided.
No. That's not true. Don't say this, everybody. That's only me and Jake have that moment.
Well, I mean, there have been episodes that I just did them early.
Like 60 episodes.
Yeah, I just got those out of the way. What's your problem? But no, it's like Iron Cal Ripken sitting it down.
Yeah.
Just being like, nope, taking the afternoon off, fellas. I'm good. My record is firmly in place.
Yeah. No, Jake made it to 100, which I didn't. I was a couple episodes shy of 100, so...
Are you sour about that?
No, I'm a little wistful. I wouldn't say I'm sour. I feel like I admired Jake's...
If this was a press conference right now, everybody would be writing about how that's bullshit. Like, don't buy it for a minute.
And I just want to thank Jesus Christ for letting me do this.
All these episodes in a row.
Yeah.
So much bullshit I've been able to spout.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, I would say, is actually just home playing all the sweet video games that came out the past week. He's actually at the opera.
He's at the opera, which will be an interesting point to consider next episode when we read an email about opera.
Yeah.
Because Jake made a bunch of claims about opera last
He did.
Mm-hmm. And some reader went,
and a very educated reader decided to make some points.
Somebody cornered me about that, too. Oh, Pierre at the office. Just was like, Jake doesn't know what he's talking about. He just went off for like 20 minutes.
Is Pierre an opera man?
Opera specifically?
I guess so, yeah. He had some very strong opinions about it. Yeah,
it's funny because I was a music major and like I have definitely seen a number of operas and I know some operas and there are some that I like, but I definitely am not that guy. Mm-hmm. Like the email the guy wrote. This is stupid to talk about because we're not going to talk about it until next week. But so let's actually talk about what's going on. We actually recorded a podcast a couple days ago.
It was so good.
It was probably the best one that we've recorded ever.
Mm-hmm. And Jake was on it.
Jake was on it. Nick wasn't. So these things are all these all contribute to no. But
it's certain flavor.
Yeah. But our equipment destroyed it.
Yeah.
So we're going to try this again. And hopefully it sticks this time.
If this one doesn't, it's been excellent, and the podcast is over.
Right. Yeah, if we lose 2 of these in a week, Idle
Thumbs will just be the home of Dota Today.
Yeah.
Well, we have quality control moves in place now. Sean is going to be monitoring the podcast through his set of cans. Here.
I'm telling you, I just put them on. Sound excellent.
Just sound magnifique.
It's crisp.
Yeah.
Really nice.
All right. Anyway. We're done talking about absolutely nothing for like 5 minutes straight.
It's called a soft opening.
This has been an amazing week of video game. Like the week leading up to today has been pretty remarkable as far as I'm concerned because essentially within that week, maybe a few days before, the Swapper came out and then Gunpoint came out this week. And these are like, I mean, I don't know if both of you guys have played both those games.
Yes.
Sean, I know you have. Nick, I don't know.
I
if
played
you've
them a
ever-
little.
Okay. These are some of the most impressive games I feel like I've played in a while.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am extremely happy about this situation. Well, it's like, Sean, you were saying the other day, you know, like you go through periods sometimes where you're like, all right, stuff's coming out, like, cool, you know, whatever. People have like there's like the big kind of tentpole games that come out, and it's like, all right, cool. But like sometimes you get into one of those phases where a couple things come out that are just really affecting to you, and you get really.
Do you think it has to do with the
happy about
fact
things.
that you know Tom Francis and he's one guy who made one great game? Is that a piece of it, you think?
No, I don't think so, because the Swapper, I don't know anything about the person who made that game.
Yeah.
You know, and I still feel like it's really excellent. I am separately extremely happy for Tom Francis, who made Gunpoint, like as its own thing. Like that is great. And in general terms, the fact that a guy like that, he's a writer, he writes for PC Gamer. He's been a game writer for years, and this is the first game he's ever made, and I'm pretty sure the first thing he's ever programmed, which is like bonkers to me. He made this thing in Game Maker, or is that what it is? Game Maker?
Yeah, it's Game Maker.
And it's fantastic. It's one of the most solid game designs I've seen recently.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm really impressed.
Yeah. It's really, really, really good. I've played it enough now to
You were
where
playing it when we came in.
Yeah. Well, like I was playing when I feel like I've been now 3 podcasts in a row, but I'm to a point now where I have like my like things I love about it and things I'm like, oh, you know, but like I just want to talk about the things I love about it. I think I don't really want to talk about other stuff. I mean,
I'll be right back.
we talk. I'm not talking to an. I'm not talking to an.
I'll wait for things.
Okay, I'll throw it back in. What I love about Gunpoint is, it's just so. I mean, you were just sitting there while I was playing.
Yeah. And I was angry. So watching you play.
Were you angry separately in life?
But then watching you
just
play.
an angry man.
Yeah. But watching you play, though, I became happy.
But I think I'd just be playing, and like every 5 or 10 minutes, I'd just hear,
Yeah.
oh, God, this music.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh.
So let's explain
It's
what
really
this game,
good.
what this game is, like roughly. We've probably mentioned. No, wait, I think we've mentioned it before, but just really quick. Let's see if I can keep this like 30 seconds. This is a side-scrolling game where you play a detective. I don't know, like a kind of infiltrator, kind of trench coat guy.
You're a freelance spy.
Spy, essentially, who sneaks into buildings in order to steal information and conduct sabotage and things. And so you gain very early in the game the ability to rewire systems, power systems, like cameras, doors,
Anything that's on a circuit, basically.
in order to reconnect those things, create new relationships, and outwit the guards, basically. And so you can do totally crazy things like hook up a door to a light switch and open the door by flicking the light switch. Or like a level beyond that, if you turn out a light, the guard then goes to turn the light back on, but by then you've rewired the light switch to the door. So when he tries to flick the light switch on, it actually throws the door open violently and smacks him in the face and knocks him out.
Yeah.
And it's that
or
kind
traps him in a room or
right.
Yeah.
And it's just the best.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic.
And it has a fidelity of control that is spectacular. You use just A and D to move left and right, and W to sort of activate things, and then your mouse is a charged jumping mechanic that allows you to fling yourself across big spaces in really, really clean, nice arcs. And you have these sort of flow moments that you get in a good game.
Totally.
That you get in a game about...
Feel that way about both of these games.
Right. And very different, though.
Very different.
Yeah, there's like dexterous flow versus sort of like logical flow from
Between
the
like
swapper.
the beauty of a plan unfolding,
yeah.
in a very calculated way.
And then you make the plan, and then you have this dexterous sort of like
Execution
flow. Whereas I think we'll talk about it in a minute. A swapper is sort of like when you get into the zone on like a crossword puzzle, where you're like, this is this, and then this. I'm going to put this there, do that there, do that there.
That's a really
you know
interesting
what I mean?
comparison,
I don't know. I feel like that's like maybe that's just very personal, but like you just on an exit of a building, there was a guard still alive, but I really quickly just wired a security camera to the door I wanted to go out, and flung myself at it. So when I went through the security camera, it opened the door and I just went out beautifully. I just sort of like it was really. Man. And I went like, and you watched that actually. I was like,
yeah.
Like this is really
like
wonderful.
Play,
Yeah. And the game is. That's the thing that actually boggles my mind the most because I feel like feel controls, like this is sort of like, every little bit of response and like how slow, how fast does this guy ramp up when he runs and how quickly does he stop and what does it feel like when I stick to a wall? Those things are so mercurial for most programmers to just get ever so right and be like, this is exactly how I want it to feel. It's not floaty. The guy's got weight.
And like the swapper, for example, doesn't quite nail that specific part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Tom Francis just walks up to the plate and he's like, I think I know how to do this, and just nails it.
It's like Blue Oyster Cult or something. Blue Oyster Cult, they were like a bunch of critics, like they were a bunch of like music writers, and there's like we could like make a rock band. And then they write, like, Don't Fear the Reaper. And you're like, you fuckers. All right. Fine. Like, do that, I guess.
Whatever. I guess you could. Yeah.
Like, Tom Francis just been, like, just chugging along, writing really well. Like, he's a really good writer. Writing really good games journalism for years and years and years. And be like, what if I tried programming a game? What if I tried to make a game?
Yeah. And he doesn't come across as, like, chuffed
Which
for
I guess
himself.
is also like Richard Hoffmeyer of Cart Life. I think that guy had done some stuff beforehand.
Richard Hoffmeyer, though,
he is a much weirder figure in total. He's much more like enigmatic.
Right.
Not weirder is a pejorative.
I would agree.
Like, yeah.
I think in his like IGF acceptance speech, I didn't even know this existed like 6 months ago. Thank you guys so much.
That's true. That is a big difference. Yeah. Whereas Tom Francis,
obviously,
he's been like an observer of all this stuff very deeply for years and years and years.
So, actually, this is a question that I haven't brought up to you yet, as in any of our conversations, like recorded or otherwise. But I want to get to it when we talk about the swapper, because this is a dumb question. This is something I've been thinking about. I mean, maybe this is totally not right to talk about, but Gunpoint has like been sort of hanging in the top 5 on Steam since release, which is awesome.
Yeah.
A swapper has sort of fallen away.
It fell away pretty quickly.
Yet, I would say the atmosphere and the production value and just sort of like the money on the screen, if that's a really bad way to say it, but it just looks like such a polished swapper.
Yeah.
So it's a
and
really
I don't think it was an expensive game, but I know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Like, it's got those particle effects and shaders and
just beautiful
like
lighting
and things that are 3D
specular shit all over the place.
Like,
So what's the question?
My question is...
Well, I think you're saying why is this
why
the
do you...
case?
Yeah, because I think the game...
One has gun in the name.
Well,
it's definitely part of it.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
For
like,
real.
Gunpoint is a great name.
It's a great name. The swapper.
Not so good a name.
The swapper?
Not so good.
Cool in the swapper?
Yeah, I'm calling out the swapper.
Well, it's called that. Your character is actually John Swapper.
You mean Joanne Swapper?
Joanne Swapper.
Yeah, Jean.
She goes by Joe.
How about Sam?
Sam Swapper.
Sam Swapper, because I feel like, that could go either way.
Yeah, who knows?
It's a unisex name.
Yeah.
But it just kind of bums
Sam
me.
Swapper sounds like the name of a mid 2000s. God, it's too bad Jake's not here for this idiotic joke. Like a mid 2000s European 2D adventure game that like some like Spanish company or like French company or something.
Yeah.
Like Sam Swapper. He's a tough talking private eye. Like, and it's got like a stupid dog that talks maybe. I don't. This is like that's what when I hear Sam Swapper, I think of like that like mid tier kind of European adventure game developer that existed in great numbers for some reason for several years.
Or a
Do you guys know what I'm
nouveau.
talking about at all? Or am I just an insane
No, with you.
person?
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with you, Chris.
Son of a bitch.
The swappers. So on the flip side, I mean, they're very similar in the way you plan things out. But in the swapper, you're on a space station and you get a device that allows you to clone yourself. And every input it's a 2D game. So you left, right, up, down. You run and jump.
I hear you say 2D without thinking of 2D consomme.
2D
Like
consomme?
every single
2D,
time you
2D
say
1-2?
you say 2D, like it doesn't. I only mentioned it now, but it's literally every single time in our lives that I hear you say
You're haunted by the
2D,
ghost of 2D consomme?
I just hear 2D consomme.
2D
So
consomme.
anyway, Oh,
Thanks.
You know,
No, go on. No, this no. Fuck games on this one, okay? Jake's not here. Just fuck it. Like, whatever. This is the second version.
we don't talk about video games when video games isn't here. The swapper. Whenever I hear you say the swapper, I just think of you saying Gunga Galunga. Like, I just think of you impersonating.
So I can't even say words anymore without you just hearing me say the bullshit words
Right.
that
You
I
Say that, all I hear is Obama.
Well, I think of you saying, like,
what do you want me to do?
A caddy.
I can't say anything without you.
What do you want me to say?
What do you?
I think of you saying, like, a caddy, a swapper.
Oh yeah,
A jock.
Like a caddy, a jock.
Whenever you say swapper, that's all I think of. Sorry if I could just, like, serially derailed you at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can serially derail something once it's already been derailed, but
I think it just as it starts to get back onto the rail, you give it a little nudge.
the people in the coach cars, what the fuck
I think we're
going
good.
on?
Oh look, guys, we're finally going. I got the fight.
Yeah. Anyway, so the swapper. It's a game where you
You mean the swappa? You mean the Gunga Galunga? The Gunga
No, I've ruined everything for myself.
And our readers.
Yeah, and everyone. Sorry, this podcast was also mysteriously ruined. Distortion.
Yeah.
Checking it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I was just thinking that while you were saying it. Yeah.
Joke about it.
It's time to do that.
Oh, you sound really nice.
Oh, you're goddamn right, I do.
Whoa. All right.
I know that I'm going directly to yours right now, so.
I'm Jake.
I know Brad came on Dota Today and we went to record. He's like, you guys have such nice voices. I'm like,
Yeah.
you, sir.
Yeah. No, Brad is a prince.
Did you feel the energy of Brad Muir over there?
Yeah, it's still
Just
kind of hovering.
God, that guy's got a lot of energy.
Yeah.
He does.
It's really, really impressive.
Yeah. Should we mention this?
Massive Chalice?
Well,
Why not?
Dota Today and Brad Muir. Did we already mention it? I don't think we
Yeah, I mean, so Nick and I started our own Dota podcast because we weren't allowed to talk about Dota anymore on this one. Because Chris and Jake drew a pretty hard line in the sand on
Nick
that
and I
one.
started our own Dota podcast because we were grounded by our parents, and we weren't allowed to play Super Nintendo anymore.
Look
So
how
we
well
started
it
our own
turned
Dota
out.
podcast.
It's like amazing.
It's fine. It's
I'm
good.
so
It's
jealous
all
of your podcast.
You can come on sometime. Maybe we'll have you.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe.
I'm just an idiot
We'll
about
see.
that stuff.
See if we can
But,
book you.
Yeah, these guys do a podcast now called Dota Today, which is dotatoday.net. You can find it there. It's on our website. And they this week's episode 2, they had Brad Muir, one of my coworkers from Double Fine, on talking obviously about Dota 2 and also about Massive Chalice, which is a game we're kickstarting right now that Brad thought of and is in charge of. It
was fun because
your
we talked
episode
about-
was great. It was a really good episode.
Well, I guess
liked it a
you
lot.
heard it, yeah. But it was fun talking about just sort of game agnostic, just mechanics. You know, taking a mechanic from here and how it can apply somewhere else, and things he's learned by playing Dota that he has sort of ingrained in himself that he wants to put in a Massive Chalice. And I've been playing either just some friends games and also games at other companies lately, just giving notes for friends. And I was playing a sort of a top-down action thing for a friend who works at a company in town. And I said, does somebody on the team play Dota? He's like, oh yeah, these guys are fucking obsessed with it. I was like, you could just tell because of
I know what
things
you're
like
talking
character positioning and those things mattering. And I don't know. I thought that was a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, that's cool.
You should check it out
It's
on
funny,
that podcast.
I feel like,
the
I
Not
feel like-
Ruined one.
Yeah, okay. I was just going to start talking about Dota. This is insane. I'll just come on your podcast someday. But
Wow!
I can't.
You force us to create our own other podcast.
Yeah.
So we don't talk about Dota anymore.
This is such a dad moment right now. This is amazing.
I learned
A dad
it from you.
moment.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Don't swear, kids. Fuck. Oh, Dad, you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
No,
so,
you should go. I'll have you on sometime.
so this is this entire conversation, this entire 4 conversations we've had exists in the middle of a sentence you were saying about the swapper. So let's go back to the swapper.
Let's go back to that sentence.
the Swapper is great.
You were talking.
It is a 2-dimensional
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
action, not
rendered
action,
in 3D, but
puzzle platformer.
Yeah.
Rendered in 3D, where you are on a space station and you get a device that allows you to make clones of yourself that you can then transport your consciousness in between, as long as you can essentially shoot them.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really remarkable about the game is so you have to solve puzzles and find objects based on using your clones to get to them. And every time you take one step forward, all your clones take one step forward. Every time you jump, they all jump. Mm-hmm. So you use that sort of direct one-to-one character input to solve platforming puzzles. Stand on
Feels
left.
like certain parts of Braid.
Yes. I mean, and that's the thing, right? If I said A game that came out this week is a combination of Braid and Metroid with a little bit of Portal to it, and it's set in space, and it's not top 10 on Steam right now.
And it kind of feels like that movie Moon.
Yeah. What the fuck?
Yeah. Oh, right. This is what we got diverged from.
Right.
You were talking about the top 10 thing.
Yeah, and now that game is like, buy this game. It's like $12, $11.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I think Gunpoint's $9.
Yeah, for together,
can get
you
them
these
both.
for $20.
They have a special deal going right now called They're Being Sold.
These games actually exist, and you can play them.
Yeah.
They're for you. And you can get both of them for like $20. It's unreal to me how good these games are.
Chris is going into PR actually after he's done being a
These games are for you.
But I mean I can't really recommend the game enough. I'm only a couple hours in. I've hit my first real wall in a puzzle where I'm like, oh god, this one's really challenging. And I've like made my wife sit down and try to help me.
Yeah. So I'm farther than you are, but we're both not. I mean, I've played like 3 or 4 hours, I think, but we're both apparently not far enough to have finished the game. And one of the things that is really fascinating to me, I was thinking about, I mentioned Moon a second ago, and this tonally, this reminds me of Moon a lot, even though it's completely different. But one of the things that it made me think about is that. So I'm gonna say some things about Moon that are spoilers and assume that's fine. So sorry if it isn't, but that movie is about a character who.
Oh,
I know. You thought it was going to be about a moon. It's about a guy who lives on the moon.
so it's kind of both.
Yeah. It's about a guy played by Sam Rockwell who lives on a moon base alone, ostensibly, and is, responsible for this mining operation that just takes forever. And it turns out over the course of the movie, you learn that the Sam in this movie that is actually just the latest of a sort of disgustingly high number of clones that of the original Sam, who eventually sort of deteriorate and die and then are replaced with the next clone.
They have like a 3-year shelf life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what I thought was interesting, and so the Swapper is also kind of about this. Like there are moments in the Swapper that are like weird and shocking, but they're just incidental gameplay moments. They're not things that happen like in a cutscene or something. You can start doing really impressive things in this game. When you right click to place one of your clones, the entire timescale of the world slows to a crawl. So the simulation is still technically running, but you have plenty of time to like place your clone and then zap into that, like transfer your consciousness into that clone. And then, so what you realize at a certain point, and this is an amazing moment when you first do it, is that you can basically you can sort of fly by just cloning yourself way above you, immediately swapping into that higher clone, repeating. And all the other clones that you've created just splat. They just fall to the ground and ragdoll, and they're just dead forever. And the game never remarks on it at all. Yeah, and it's really weird. And there's clearly a version of this game that could have existed that was just the kind of fun, quirky game. And in fact, I've played games like that on Newgrounds and stuff. And where that have similar mechanics, but that don't put the tonal pieces in place to kind of put you off, to put you on edge,
unease.
It's going to give you that unease. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was funny because Moon eventually, even right from the beginning, just by virtue of the fact that Moon is one guy on a space station with a weird computer, it gives you a sense of unease. But when Moon starts unveiling that conceit, the movie is entirely about the kind of interpersonal effect that this incredibly strange situation would have on a person
what's funny,
and himself.
I actually think that this is more akin to something like The Prestige, where you're actually complicit in your own clone's demise.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So yeah, pick up on that in a second, because I never even thought of that. That's really interesting. The thing I was going to say is that I guess probably the reason I thought of Moon is just because they're both in space.
Yeah, sure. I mean, tonally, it's totally.
Yeah,
but obviously,
but I still want to hear your thoughts on this. But like, the thing I thought was interesting is that, and this, Nick, I'm sure this is what you're going to speak to in a second.
I'm not going to speak
the Swapper, like,
I refuse.
No, I want you to. The Swapper doesn't bother with that stuff at all. At least not at the beginning of the game. It's entirely about like, how do you manipulate these things in just the most effective way. It's about it's purely about the mechanical aspect of that, and it lets the other implications just like literally fall to their death. And like it makes me really I'm sure there's people listening to this who have completed the game already and are like tearing their hair out because I wonder what happens in this video game.
Yeah.
But I'm really like, to me, if there's not a payoff for that, I'm going to be bummed. You know, like if there's not a payoff for this weird thing that the game, like Nick, as you put it, is making you complicit in, like I'm going to be bummed about that because it's really interesting in a way that most games that feel like this don't usually push on very hard.
Yeah.
And I find that really intriguing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I only played it for 20 minutes, but I mean, there was a moment where I was at a lift, and that was very British of me. But I was at an elevator, and I
Sci-fi settings always use words like lift, though, because it sounds more abstract.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was a lift.
Yeah.
I just...
It's probably a grav lift.
Right,
so.
right, exactly. And I kind of used a clone to essentially like test the depth of this lift. You know, I just cloned one just to see what the fall would do.
Survive the fall
Like
damage.
hear a pebble fall to the bottom of a well.
Yeah, exactly. And
Except it's just you.
And he
one
fell, but he like I didn't think there was actually any like physics modeling in this game, but like he sort of clipped through the lift, and then his leg was just falling off of the lift, and he just basically got caught in the thing. And so as I was like eventually riding this elevator down, my clone was just dead next to me, like contorted and weird.
Oh, doing this video game
just doing this
ragdoll
really horrible video
stuff?
game ragdoll
Yeah.
thing. And like in that moment, I was like, man, yeah, this is really disturbing. And I hope that like that was the intention, because if it is, it's really good. Like.
Yeah.
It has to be. There are
must be.
puzzles later where
and also,
you have to manage how many of yourself you have alive. So there's just a pit, you know, and you're like, I'll just run two of them into the pit. So I get two, and like, that's when it's just so.
Also, the narrative content. Also, for what it's worth, like I haven't completed the game, and I actually don't know if the main character is even a male or a female. It's not even.
I keep thinking it's a woman because of something
about
that
this.
I've corrected you like 3 times for some reason, but it's only because I think it is a woman, but because maybe that's a reality I wove for myself early on.
Yeah. You could be right. But I think the first you over the course of the game, you uncover things through little written logs and also occasional less common audio. Little fragments from another person in this.
And sometimes you see that person on the same screen as you.
And one of the first ones you find, maybe the first one you find, is a written log between 2 people who, you know, presumably formerly lived in this base, which is now almost entirely uninhabited. And one of them just says something like, "Yeah, you know, Kim just refuses to even be in the room with one of those swapper devices. Just doesn't trust it." And it's like, Nick, you were saying, I hope that's the intent. Like, it must be.
Okay,
if they wrote something like that.
Sure,
you know, I mean, I
good.
love that the first thing, I think you find that right at the beginning of the game.
It's really nice.
And I agree. It really sets the tone in a really cool way. And the game has kind of Portal-like mechanics, such as areas you can't clone into, or areas you can't swap into if there's a clone there, and those are represented by sort of colored lights that are projected, and you can block those lights and so on. But that very early initial little narrative seed, I feel like, kind of sells the notion that this, when they created this thing, they didn't really know what it was, and after they realized what it was, they had to find ways to limit it. You know, and like
totally.
I thought that was effective. You know, I mean, it's still obviously a very puzzle game conceit thing. Like, oh, we need to gate you in some areas, and we need to give constraints to make the puzzles more interesting. But I didn't find myself that stuff didn't seem egregious to me. It was like, oh man, this is a weird thing.
The
to
little
exist.
bits, like the audio logs, and just the little snippets of story you do get are like really nicely executed on. They're really well written, and they don't overstay their welcome. And
the one exception to that for me is the kind of weird telekinetic mind rocks you pass by, that kind of beam, goofy,
braid-like, I would say.
Yeah. Little, obviously intended to read like disembodied consciousness, you know, coming into your brain, like sort of the earliest bits of self-awareness.
Existential question.
Yeah, and it's like,
stuff,
it just seems so done before. You know, I'm just not super crazy about it. But the actual concrete, you know, human written stuff that you find, I like a lot. Oh, you know what's interesting? I mentioned this to you guys the other day, but it was so funny because I was playing Gunpoint, and I really like the writing in Gunpoint. It's really like snappy and clever and cool. But I find myself not necessarily needing it that much, not because I think it's bad, but just because I'm like, everything about this game sells what this game is. You know, like everything. Tom Francis even goes to the point of spelling out right at the beginning of the game, just I guess almost similar to how the Swapper does it, why you have the ability to like survive these incredibly long falls and why you can jump these crazy distances and so on. And it's funny, I didn't think about this specific comparison till right now, but it's funny to me that both of these games, which are both very mechanics driven, player oriented games, both kind of give you a little just hint, a little bit of framing for their core conceit right at the beginning. But Gunpoint does it in a way that just by its tone is like, and it's like, you got magic pants. Like, like don't worry about it. Like, it works. That's all you need to know. Whereas in the Swapper's case, it's like, yeah, I just can't stand being around this weird Swapper device. And so you're like, what? Like, already.
I have to use this thing.
Yeah, constantly. What does that mean? Yeah, and I thought I found it really interesting how much that just set the tone for what I want out of the narrative of those games. Whereas in Gunpoint, it's like, well, the narrative is cool, like the dialogue is cool, but like ultimately you're this freelance spy who's hired to go on these missions, and like that's exactly what the game is. That's what it is. Like I don't, I haven't completed the game yet, so there might very well be weird twists and turns later. But I mean, essentially, the stuff that's going on
those
thematically
pants are alive.
Exactly. Whereas
you are the pants. That guy's a dead body. Gunpoint is a cadaver, and you are just the pants. It's like a Weekend at Bernie's situation.
Oh man, gross. Whereas in the Swapper, and a part of it is also just how the games look. Like I think Tom Francis smartly didn't go overboard with like the crazy narrative stuff in Gunpoint because that game looks very kind of good-natured. Whereas the Swapper looks really melancholy and kind of almost Metroid-like, but even more so in its solitary, dismal nature.
I had a moment playing the Swapper where it was like, yes, God, I'm like, yes. So my wife sat down behind me to play it.
And you were just like, yes, yeah.
I was in 2 seconds because she goes, oh man, this game is, wow, it's kind of like Metroid. I was like, whoa, what? What? She's like, yeah, I remember that game being cool. I was like, do you want to play Super Metroid together sometime? Yeah, I'd really like that. Let's do that. That game was like really...
When was the last time Amelia played a video game of her own volition?
I don't know. I've known Amelia for 4 years. I don't know. I've never seen her do it.
Well, so at least... Right.
That's what I was getting when she was at home with like my brother-in-law, we're like the exact same age, almost like freakishly so. And we both had games and came up around the same, but both Nintendo families, so like very similar. Sure. Yeah, so he must have back then. Yeah.
Nick just cast you a
no, it just talking about that reminded me of explaining StarCraft 2 to Amelia, and also reminded me we should talk about that BarCraft.
Oh yeah, we should.
That was really sweet of you, by the way.
That was really fun. Trying to explain StarCraft 2 to somebody who has no conception of what an RTS is. Yeah. Hilarious. Yeah, but also kind of it's good in the same way of explaining Dota to somebody who doesn't know what Dota is. But
you want to talk about where we were, what the context was?
I mean, so there was a StarCraft 2 championship is the regional WCS America
regional finals
playoffs last weekend. And the local bar here, just a block down the street from us, Dear Mom.
He's a really great
friend
bar.
of the show.
Jay Beeman owns Dear Mom. Yeah, hey Jay, we love your bar. It's the best.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, they actually hosted a BarCraft, which is when you just go to a bar and watch StarCraft on television or whatever. With an amazing custom menu of food. God, we should have that menu and just read from it because it's on the blog. It's on the blog. There we go. Okay.
I mean, there are some things I can remember.
Yeah. The Zerg
toast. There's one thing that I remember.
The Zerg eggs. And most importantly,
the Planetary Fortress.
No.
Oh, yeah, right.
Most importantly, Tassador's Wiener.
Tassador's Wiener, of course.
Yeah. But the food at Dear Mom is spectacular. Yeah. So even though it says Zerg eggs.
Right.
And Tassidar's wiener, you're still getting like
still getting quality.
an artisanal hot dog.
Let's not undersell the
And
here.
the Zerg eggs were like these potato pancakes with like dusted with like chili powder and these poached eggs and like cheese and aioli. Like it was delicious, but you're eating Zerg eggs. And in fact, when I placed my order at the food counter, I was like, I'll have an order of the eggs, and the waitress was like, "You mean the Zerg eggs?" Yes.
Yeah, those.
Yes, I mean the Zerg eggs. I'm sorry that we're infesting your
All right,
your bar here.
Yeah, but it was really cool.
Yeah, so like I had never seen competitive. This is the second time I'd ever seen competitive StarCraft, I should say.
Yeah,
but we brought. I promised my wife that I would take her to brunch, but I didn't tell her that it was.
You didn't tell her,
Mom.
I didn't know that part. Oh my god,
that makes it even funnier because she saw the menu and it was like the tasty tosis, the infested hamburger, Tassidar's wiener, Zerg eggs, like all this bullshit, buffalo wings of liberty, and she'd only been to this bar once before, and so we were sitting there all eating for a while. She and I had both of the eggs and we were kind of talking about it. And someone at one point said something about how these were StarCraft things, and she was like, "Wait, these are all jokes from a video game? I thought this bar was just super weird."
But then when there was a match, I was trying to under your wing, and
I was really trying. And she was hilarious though. She said the funniest thing. She was like I was explaining, like, the resource system. Like, you have to collect minerals, and then you collect gas, and then you spend those minerals on gas on building buildings, and then you make those buildings build men, and then they all, and she's like, so what do you do with them all? And I was like, well, you just all go to war. And she was like, wait, so there's nothing to do other than just fight and kill each other? And I was like, yeah, pretty much. She was like, what would happen if everybody just decided to go to the middle of the map and just lay down arms and just build buildings and construct like a really nice place? And I was like, I don't know. That's amazing. What would happen? I don't know. I guess it's a stalemate.
Yeah.
Well, because then you hypothesize that if two guys in the finals were just like,
oh yeah,
well, because the semifinals was two guys from the same team.
Right.
So it's like, what if they're both just like, say, bro, I don't want to do it. I want to
make
they would probably be banned from StarCraft. They would probably be completely ostracized.
You don't think like a cello would start playing and everybody would realize and have like an end of a 90s movie moment?
Right,
like,
The first guy in the audience gets up and just does the slow clap.
Yeah.
Just Bittersweet Symphony's playing.
Yeah,
it's just like, yeah.
It'd be good.
Yeah, it would be.
Let's just make a bass that's aesthetically pleasing.
Right, yeah.
So what you guys need to do is somehow seed... No, this wouldn't work. I was going to say, like, to somehow seed,
it would never work.
To somehow seed players into a Dota game on both sides who would then, but like...
There's nothing you could do.
There's nothing you could do.
You could just do it, just all meet in the river and have a dance party or something.
Yeah. That happened to me, actually. I talked about this on All years ago. I was playing Halo... Halo 2 one time with my buddies. This was years ago when Halo 2 was current. And we joined this my buddy and I used to play like extremely like competitive. Like we were really hardcore. We were professionals, obviously, by any means, but like we were always really highly ranked and like really did really well. And I remember one time we went into a game and it was it was this one, I can't even remember the names anymore. I used to know all these maps. And there's a big inverted, like, it's like a big inverted dome, like a big bowl in the center of the map that is kind of a focal point and spokes of the map come off of it. And we approached that and there was music playing and we're like, what the hell? And it turned out some guy had plugged his MP3 player directly into his mic input and was blasting Neil Diamond. And he was just like, Neil Diamond dance party, let's go. And everybody from almost everyone from the game was just in there doing the thing where you like crouch and stand up again. And everyone is just in there doing the crouch dance.
Oh man.
And there were like 2 or 3 guys from like both teams who's like, what the fuck is this gay shit? Like running around trying to kill people, and people would just kill those guys and then keep dancing. And it was the absolute best thing. It was so fun.
That would happen in Counter-Strike a lot, as I recall.
Really?
Just like people would just be like, let's just have a knife thing, and then everybody would just pick up their knife and run to the middle, and then they would just kind of look at each other, like the the terrorists and the counter-terrorists would just be like, and then somebody would just start broadcasting bullshit, and just everybody would just like run around and jump and like
phrases, let's have a knife thing.
like only knives this round, and just be like, what? And then it would just devolve into just madness. Like
we had a one-on-one we did a thing at Telltale like years ago when we used to be super into TF2. there was this TF2 Fight Club where we'd go onto these servers and convince strangers what we were trying to accomplish, which was everybody meet in the middle of the map. We'll just make a ring, and then it's just one-on-one.
Right.
You'd be like, you and you, go. And then they'd have to go in there with melee, and then like,
Were there classes that just dominated that?
Not really. Not in particular, if I remember. I mean, I'm in my mental, in my mind's eye, I see people playing like as the heavy and as the demolitions man, the demonstrations man, as Jay calls him.
But the sniper would be tough in that situation.
Well, it depends. He's got that Kikri crazy knife now.
Yeah, you can always go melee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was always melee. Yeah, that was the thing. So it was really fun. What a weird podcast this one is.
Yeah.
Nick, I am curious about something. On Twitter, like 5 days ago, you posted something like, I can't believe Metro Last Light. How did 4A make this game?
Oh, yeah.
What?
I can't believe it. I can't believe they've done this.
Believe it. I can't believe you've done this.
Yeah. No, I kind of dismissed that game on the last podcast, as I recall.
And I dismissed that game pretty hard.
I caught a lot of shit for it,
yeah.
From a specific person. But yeah, it's really fucking good. Have you guys played it anymore? Like, have you played
I haven't played it, period.
You haven't played it, period. Chris, you haven't really played it.
I've played a few hours, but yeah.
Played a few hours. Have you gotten to the theater, the theatrical sort of city? All right. So,
no.
There's this specific level, and I'm just going to spoil it because otherwise I have nothing to talk about. But so you get to this hub that's essentially like the place where all of the artists have just congregated in. You know, it's just like, I guess, entertainment land has just formed up in the rubble of Moscow, and this is that place. And so this is maybe like 3 hours into the game, and you're walking through this hub, and it's very Metro in the sense that it's extremely linear, and you're kind of passing these vignettes,
right.
Which is something that I criticized
in the first game.
I love that stuff in the first game. Immediately off the bat, I think part of my problem with this game initially was that there's just so much in your face talking at the beginning.
Yeah,
the guy that you're with just never stops talking, and like, I actually started to care about him a little bit despite that.
Oh, wow.
But if he had just shut up like 50% of the time, I would have cared about it even more.
Right.
But regardless, like, there's a lot of just nonstop yelling and exposition.
That's the stuff that made me give me a harder time getting into Last Light.
And at this point, you get to the hub, and that guy just goes away, and you can actually just kind of walk through it. And the vignettes, like, God, they're so technically insane to me. I mean, it's just all mocap stuff, but the pure volume of just technical artistry in this game is just destroying me right now, because I don't know how they made that game and the amount of time that they had, and probably the amount of money they had, knowing that situation. But like, it's phenomenal. You're walking through this sort of bazaar, and they're just, whenever I walk through a scene like that, it just reminds me of like The Last Express or something, where just the scenes go on way longer than you would think they would, and it does sort of become immersive, but when they're vignettes like that, it's still, I can see that, okay, this one was just triggered, and it kind of falls apart. There was one actually that was really interesting where a guy was sort of doing shadow puppets on a wall, and I thought that was really creative. But so you get past that though, and at that point I was just like, this is kind of what I expected. And you get to the actual theater where it's so funny how it's gated. It's gated in the most kind of the hilariously video game way, which is you're leaving the town, but the exit just so happens to be at the end of the theater or something. Right, sure. So it's just like, I just happen to be in this theater. But you can sit down and watch this show, and it's the show they do nightly for all of the survivors of this apocalypse. And all the artists are there, and they all come on, and they do these little like reviews. Like, there's just, set after set, and some guy's just playing a banjo, and then there are just like can girls, and then there's just a guy like twirling fire or whatever, and it goes on for like 20 minutes, and you can just sit there and watch this show.
Yeah.
And what was weird about it was, like, initially I was like, all right, I get what they're doing here. They're just stringing together all these mocap things. They're just doing this for a Kotaku post or something. Like, I was really cynical about it. I was just sitting there like, all right.
Because you're Nick Brecken.
Because I'm Nick Brecken. I was like, there's going to be an achievement at the end of this, and it's going to be just some bullshit and whatever. But the longer I watched it,
I love hearing your Grinch heart melt in real time.
It's true, though. Like, the longer I watched this show,
the more your heart grew.
The more my heart grew. Like, it was weird. Like, the ambient background noise of just whatever was going on outside of this theater, just like the weird like chattering and just kind of hollow post-apocalyptic whatever, sort of became like a strange, I don't know, like everything sort of dropped away, and it became, I guess, like if I had an Oculus Rift on, it would have been the most immersive scene I've ever experienced, I think, because I was forced to be in this seat and
started
just
convulsing because of the way you said that.
Just stare at, like,
Sorry.
But you're like the fact that
Palmer
I guess,
Luckey just like.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah, I'm sure.
yeah.
But like, I'm just
Got very excited
just the
about
fact that
that
you're sitting in this one spot and focused on a single thing
Right.
for a long period of time. It was a really weirdly unique thing to do in a game. Like, I can't really compare it to anything. And the longer it went on, the more I was just completely sold on the moment. And it actually put me in the shoes of somebody in that like weird post-apocalyptic thing. Like, I actually, for like a split second, I was like, weird. I feel like I'm in this fucking world
what's so
in a way
interesting
that
about that?
I've never felt in a game before. And it was really weird.
You know what's interesting about that to me is that I'm I don't know if skeptical is the right word, but like I'm definitely not as just wholeheartedly enraptured with the concept of immersion for its own sake as like
Well,
maybe
I'm not
some
really
are,
either.
because I'm skeptical sometimes of just escapism for its own sake, right?
For sure.
Like that can often be used to like, you know, sell a bunch of stuff that has no real substance because it just feels present or visceral, right? And like even if there's absolutely nothing there. But what's really interesting about what you're describing is that you're describing essentially the game triggering some response of empathy in you for people who actually are in a situation where escapism is entirely warranted.
Exactly.
And in like necessary to survive.
And
like you were
really
in an
astute.
escapist moment
really
of
astute.
escapism for the subjects of that scene. And like that to me is like a 100% valid time to just immerse the shit out of you. You know?
Yeah, no, it was really good.
That is
I
really
thought of that
fascinating.
when that was happening. I'm glad you brought it up because, like, you're sitting in this gallery and people behind you are just, you know, so happy to have anything that is even somewhat entertaining. And, you know, it's a surreal moment in a lot of ways, but like it really plants you in that place. And I think part of it is also just the immobility of it, which I think is what made me think of The Last Express, because in that game, when you just sit in that dining car and watch people talking, I think that's immersive in a way that if you're just running around an environment, you can't be immersed in that same way. Like, I think just the idea of just planting and focusing is something that I think you don't get in most games. And
you know what I also love about that is that moments like that, there's been kind of a common thing that is surfaced in a lot of AAA, 3D AAA games in the last several years, and it's kind of just what I think of now as just AAA sound design ambience, which I really dislike. It's like this very specific. Yeah. I mean, it sounds different from game to game, but essentially it's like tortured metal and like big stretched out moans and like huge reverby just undertone that's always there. And it's this like sound of AAA immersive games, usually shooters and sometimes third person games. It's like such a default choice to me at this point. Like it just bothers me because as soon as I hear it, I'm like, oh, it's another game that sounds like that. Just like all the other games that have all crazy graphics and sound exactly like that. It drives me up the wall. And so I find myself really, really appreciating games where that background noise is not that, but it's actually like human chatter and like the sound of people living lives and things, regardless of whether it's something that I love in a game that's set in a modern current city or a game that's set in something like Metro where it's desperate people in an underground subway station, like it's or tunnel or whatever. It's like a relief to me to have that ambience rather than just the like copy paste in more just kind of like dour AAA sound ambience shit, which I'm just really, really tired of.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was something I loved about the first Metro game was that there wasn't a lot of there wasn't as much of just the straight up exposition stuff as there is in Last Light, but there was a lot of just that human ambience, which I just really love. And also the human ambience stuff you can sell more convincingly and it breaks less frequently in the sense that like a person talking right to your face in a video game, very frequently like, they're going to say something that's pretty dumb, or the voice performance is going to be substandard, or like there's going to be some, or like the facial animation is going to be fucked. Like there's going to be something.
What was horrible about this scene is like, if you just stare straight at the stage, it totally works. But if you pan just 30 degrees right and look at the woman next to you, she's just this plastic looking, like, she's got the goofy, like, wig, detached hair thing going on, and she just looks over at you with this gaping, like, smile, like, and it's just, it just completely
Nick
falls
Brecken's
apart.
back.
Yeah. Like,
there he is.
it's totally garbage. But yeah, no, it was really interesting.
No, that sounds pretty magical.
Yeah. It sounds pretty magical.
It does.
Yeah, it was. It filled my heart with optimism for video games for 5 minutes. Anyway.
He's back in full force.
You guys want to take a little break?
Sure,
and then
let's do that.
Yeah. Gin up some reader mail? Mm-hmm. Gin it up.
Gin it up.
Or make it up.
Yeah.
It's all been fabricated for the last 109 episodes.
This is Jake at home. That's why he's not here.
Yeah, right.
He realized he's gotten behind.
Mail.
You, too, can send us mail to questions@idlethumbs.net, or send these guys Dota-related mail to lords@idlethumbs.net. I love that that's your email address. Even though that's not even in the name of the podcast. It has to be.
No, it's...
All right, now we're taking a break.
Video games.
So yeah, thanks to the guys at Asymmetrics and their game Word Realms for sponsoring this episode. It's we kind of said it in the opening bumper, but it's a single-player RPG game where you use words to go through RPG turn-based combat. It's sort of like Bookworm Adventure, if we can compare it to another game.
Yeah. Which is a game I played a lot of. So when I downloaded this, it was actually right up my alley.
Yeah. And Kevin Simmons and Zach Johnson and the dudes over there also make Kingdom of Loathing. So if you're a fan of that game, this is totally up your alley. They did a Kickstarter.
They're much more successful than we are.
Yeah, they did a Kickstarter for this game, and it was successful. And actually, because of the Idle Thumbs Kickstarter and Video Games Hot Dog, and sort of us just all being, I guess, peers, we got to know them really well, and they're really, really wonderful guys. And
worth supporting.
Yeah, this is a game that's totally worth supporting. You can get it at wordrealms.com. It's like $11, I think. And the thing that's actually pretty incredible
What's
about
with
it...
these $11 games this week?
It's just the magic number.
Yeah. Cool people.
Market forces, Chris.
I guess.
Yeah, it's what the market can bear.
Yeah.
$11.
Go figure.
I did mouth the thanks Obama, but I didn't want to say it. The thing that's really kind of incredible about this game is that they built their own dictionary and then used that to make like between 7,000 and 8,000 custom responses. So if you're fighting a guy and you say the word like boost, Chris, you write the word.
This is entirely hypothetical.
Yeah, you have a bunch of letters and you're like, oh, BOOST. You're gonna get some sort of like insult sword fighting response.
I'm going to boost my fist right into your face or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly. That's custom for that word, or is intelligently or semi-intelligently placed inside of a sentence, which usually produces some sort of unexpected or unplanned comic timing. So that's really kind of cool. I've never really played a game like that had such a hyper-specific word parser like that. It's just not something generally people take the time to do. And when you fund your own game, like these guys did, you're allowed to do it. So definitely check it out. It's at wordrealms.com.
Yeah. Good times.
Did you remember your point that you wanted to make about Metroid? Metroid or Metro?
Metroid? No, I didn't. That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
More time for you, the readers.
Yes. Let's talk to those readers.
Sure. Okay. Tyler Culp says, Additive Design. Hey, Thumbs crew, is more always better? Games like Castlestorm, a recently released tower defense game that includes the slingshot tower destruction elements of Angry Birds, and Puzzle Juice, a mix of games like Tetris and Boggle, combine other games into one. Is this kind of additive design a good thing? Is having more things to do at once better? To me, in most cases, it feels a little lazy, like a developer shoved everything together so the player never gets bored. It seems to overlook the value of simple mechanics and creates arbitrary things to do. What do you think, Tyler C.?
I mean, it's obviously the way the email's written, sort of pejorative. Yeah, it's loaded. Yeah. But there's kind of 2 points here. I think additive design of like, just and more and more and more and more is clearly not something anybody wants. Like, honestly, like Brutal Legend came to mind, where I just said, if that game had just been the tutorial and then just sort of slowly stacked the combat mechanics, that was what I expected when I played the demo at E3, and that's what I was hoping to buy. I just don't think that game suffers like. I don't think intention-wise it was like, let's just paste all these things together.
It's funny because that game actually, it was actually the other way around. That game started as much more of an RTS thing and like became more of an action game over time. So like,
interesting.
I mean, if anything, that goes to show that maybe the soul of a game often doesn't reveal itself, you know, without iteration. Like, I mean, it's, you know, game design is weird and mercurial like that.
But on the flip side, something we've been talking about a lot is sort of. Were you going to get to that? Were you going to try to re-answer that JRPG email today?
Yeah, we can do that.
You know, I mean, you can blaze through it.
We failed on our previous podcast to release a podcast.
Oh, there's another JRPG. Oh.
It's the ongoing saga of Chris's hate of the Japanese. But we'll get to that shortly.
You son of a bitch.
Never forgive me for this. Yeah. But yeah,
you're right. That is a very similar.
It's sort of the flip side of, well, you shouldn't just implement all these things in a genre because that's what you do. So I think taking something like the dialogue trees of a classic adventure game and combining them with a stealth game, and also like this fling mechanic, which is sort of very much mechanical mashup in something like Gunpoint, produces a very boiled down, like delicious game. You know, it's not
delicious dish, if you will.
It doesn't feel.
Thanks, Kirk.
It doesn't feel overly. It doesn't feel like there's too much of any one ingredient.
Right.
You know, and I think
you're going for it.
What do you mean?
Oh, just the food metaphor.
Just the metaphor? I'll let it go.
No. I enjoy it.
So I think those mechanics can just simmer in their own juices and produce a. We're gonna go to Dear Mom. You're gonna get that burger. It's not gonna be called like whatever. Yeah. Cortana's ham or whatever. Cortana's ham. It's gonna just be called a hamburger when we go there. I hope you're okay.
Cortana's ham bone. Good.
I don't know. I'm not good with names.
Yeah.
Or the correct video game reference.
I know.
What's the girl
name? Ancient Evil awakes with this third of a pound of patty.
Kerrigan.
Oh, wow.
Cortana is the other.
That makes so much sense.
What?
Because I turned to somebody at this stupid event, and there was like one unit, and I was like, "Oh, is that Cortana?" And they were like, and they like gave me the fucking full shoulder. Like they gave
I'm a professional game developer.
Like
I host a popular gaming podcast.
On their, they turned on their like x-axis or y-axis 180 degrees, and I was like, "Well, fuck you, motherfucker. Never mind." Like, geez, I come here too. I know video games. Whatever. Yeah.
Full dad.
Yeah.
Is that Super Mario?
No love for dad.
Oh, there was zero love for dad at Dear Mom. Wow.
Man, I had no idea you were such a new wood PC.
Oh, yeah. Knob
wood PC.
Knob wood PC.
Oh, that's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
What were we saying?
Video games.
I don't know.
Tyler. Sure. That's our response.
Yeah. Yes. I think we basically agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, do you want to go right from that into that other one? Because they're kind of similar. So
I heard you answer this thing 3 times already. So, and I'm just going to see how
Casper Michael
efficiently you can.
Yeah. He says, "Dear Thumbs, thanks for another great episode. I'm writing about Chris's response to an email that posited Costume Quest has the same kind of problems as a JRPG, and shouldn't that mean Chris should dislike Costume Quest?" Chris in his response said...
The logic of your opinions is confounding, Chris.
Chris in his response said that Costume Quest and 30 Flights of Loving, for example, match their ambition to the scope of the game, whereas many JRPGs by comparison do not. Further, these two games... he goes on and lists just a bunch of specific mechanics and things. He says, "My problem with this critique is that it denigrates the context within which JRPGs are produced and consumed, namely Japanese society. Japanese games aren't just free-floating commercial products that can be objectively assessed according to some transhistorical standard. They exist within a culture and within that culture's particular gaming timeline. Japanese people of diverse ages, backgrounds, and personalities buy them and play them because they love them. Some gamers from other countries love them as well. And the makers and players of these games are not crazy. They don't prefer an terminal number of nodes, and above all else, the systems are not extraneous or arbitrary. These characteristics of JRPGs are part of a particular gaming culture that has its own logic, not to mention a structure that has evolved over time in accordance to the needs of Japanese gamers and in response to the pressures of the Japanese gaming market and the desires and ambitions of Japanese game developers. It may not be Chris Rimo's culture, and he doesn't have to like it, certainly, but it is perhaps a problem to mistake cultural rules and rhythms that you don't appreciate for arbitrariness. Casper. So I thought this was...
Fucking boom, Remo!
No, I thought this was a really good email, and I think the guy's point is well taken. I want to... depending on your point of view, either defend myself or simply clarify what I was saying. So I did actually, because I intuited while I was making that point in the last podcast that there is definitely a cultural angle to that I was kind of raising without maybe giving it its proper due. I did, for that reason, deliberately also bring up first-person shooters, which is another genre I feel like has suffered. I mean, another major genre that is, right? I mean, there's other more niche genres that have had this issue as well, but another major genre that has, in my opinion, suffered from kind of design ossification, where there's just certain things that were kind of laid out in the formative examples of those genres, and the genre has sort of marched along for years and years and kind of just doubled down and dug in on those things. And I'm from the United States, I'm an American, and that genre is also largely produced by, or at least was largely pioneered by companies in the country that I'm from, and is still a lot of them are made here. So I feel like I'm not at a position of creative of cultural bias on that point. But I part of my response to his email is the notion of the word arbitrary. So to me, when he kind of brings up these sort of sociological factors and cultural factors and brings up, for example, the pressures of the Japanese gaming market as a factor that influences JRPGs, my response would be, yeah, I mean, you're right. That's undoubtedly true. But to me, that's kind of the thing I actually meant by arbitrary. Like that's something that is sort of a just the winds of business and culture and other things that may assert themselves on a game without being fully considered from the perspective of the game itself.
Right. Well, it goes
because
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I'm interrupting. Sorry. So it goes kind of beyond somebody sits down to make an RPG in Japan and goes, well, here's all the things an RPG has.
Right.
This is what we're going to design. That doesn't happen. But because they become entrenched, they sort of are they're perfunctory. They're not what's the word? They're not arbitrary. They become these perfunctory elements, which I think is something.
Sure.
And that's almost that might be
a better word to use. Probably, actually, you're right. Yeah. And I think you can look at creators from anywhere, from the United States, from Japan, from Europe, who are obviously very conscious of this and very thoughtful people and make games that are not that I don't think suffer from that as heavily. And I would say a Japanese creator who I greatly respect in that arena is Fumito Ueda, who made Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. And those are obviously not RPGs, so that it's not a direct apples-to-apples comparison, but I think essentially the point is the same, which is that unlike, for example, Keita Takahashi, who made Katamari Damacy,
that's what I've been
or something
thinking about while you're talking, but yeah.
Right, so the reason I use Ueda as an example, just for there's a million people you could use as an example, right? But just in this case, I want to compare those two guys because Takahashi, who I also love, Katamari is hilarious and Nobunobu Boy's bonkers. Those games are so far outside any traditional genre constraints that I feel like they're not as useful for this direct comparison.
Enough. They almost feel either like A, pure art, or B, as almost like a reaction.
Yeah, against. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas Fumito Ueda, I feel like exists very comfortably inside relatively traditional bounds of what a game is. Like, what is a video game person who likes video games and buys a lot of video games? What does that person think a game is? Oh, well, it's a guy runs around and like fights some monsters and solves some puzzles and explores an area and does some things. But I don't feel like those games are saddled with all of these assumptions about like third-person action games or
collecting
platformers
shit.
Or
I suspect the difference is just in the density of narrative, right? Because those games, the narrative is like this thin, right? And I feel like
there's no narrative.
there's almost there's some, but there's,
I was going to say
there's like almost
the difference
nothing.
between what a JRPG and
I think
the differences are way deeper than that.
Well, okay.
I mean,
Then elucidate me.
Well, so the thing I was going to say is that there are relatively few mechanics in a game like Eco. Like there are a lot of interesting systems, like pulling along the girl and having, when you jerk the analog stick too far in one direction, you kind of run and like jerk her along and she kind of stumbles, and that's a really affecting moment. But in terms of mechanics, the stuff you as the player are doing, it's pretty stripped down compared to a lot of other Japanese third-person action or exploration games, whether they be kind of Devil May Cry, like crazy action things, or platformer sort of collecting driven games that are not as combat oriented. Like those games really boil down to the essence of what each game is trying to be about. And I feel like there's a thoughtfulness and an extreme restraint to those designs that I really appreciate. And they feel a lot less perfunctory to me. And I feel like in JRPGs, it's less common, at least certainly in most of the ones I've been exposed to, it seems there is such an overwhelming amount of just this particular expectation of these mechanics, even when there's like this one, like our twist on JRPG battles is this, or like our crazy weird inventory thing works like this, but they're in general very still saddled with a lot of these just like perfunctory choices, and that's not inherently bad. Like I think it's totally fine for someone to just really enjoy that and play those games. Like that's total. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think that the fact that a bunch of people do means it's offensive to point out that they may have become. There might be a certain amount of just creative stagnation going on, and because I don't think that's unique to JRPGs at all. I think it's actually quite common in a number of genres, and I would actually be quite interested to read someone's like sociological paper that goes into why Japanese culture, Japanese business practices, Japanese taste, all inclusively has resulted in these decisions. I think that would actually be really fascinating. Like, that would be extremely interesting. But I don't think the fact that has happened is in and of itself a reason to excuse kind of unconsidered extraneous design. And I know, again, like it's just my opinion that it's extraneous design, of course, but I mean, I'm the one. That's my opinion. I mean, someone else,
I'm the one who's got his own podcast.
Someone else. My point is not to say that other people's opinions are wrong or that my opinion is the only correct one. It's just to say I think there's a difference between kind of cultural forces generally and just evaluating an individual work on its merits. Because I really do think this criticism I have applied, in fact, on this podcast before to games that are not Japanese at all of any genre. I don't think it's exclusive to that culture in any way, shape, or form. But I do think this was an extraordinarily interesting email, and I'm glad the guy wrote it. Because it's always worth being conscious when you're talking about this stuff. I mean, yeah.
So says Chris Remo, the American.
Sorry for that big dump there.
No.
I was called out. I wanted to explain myself.
You gotta step to being called out.
Yeah.
Lest
you become a monster. Nietzsche said that, I think.
How you doing, Nick?
Sorry, you seem.
Huh?
That seems to have bummed you out. That my answer?
No, it's
he's actually playing The World Ends With You on his iPhone. With his left hand over there.
Going home to my,
which is actually,
playthrough.
I haven't played that game, and I almost bought it
World
today.
Ends With You,
they have a new iPad version of it. But I feel like that game does some sort of mechanically very sort of different
It was a
things.
crazy game. I actually, what's funny is I wanted to enjoy that game more than I did. I feel like that was one of those games that I respected a lot, but I was just bad at. I just had for whatever reason, I'm like, this is really cool. And I was just really bad at it. There was like a dual control thing that I just could never quite pick up very well. Yeah. But it was cool. I liked it. Let's see here. Mike Roberts says, Metro in Russian. Hey, Thumbs.
Isn't this the opera one?
No. He says, hey, Thumbs, make sure you read this before Steve's Light Gem email. I don't want to have to follow that. We'll get that next week when Jake is back. Steve's Light Gem email. He says, the thing about playing Metro in Russian is that if you can understand it, the voice acting is... Oh, wait. This is also a response to Jake. Maybe we should wait on this as well.
Yeah.
Man, Jake, when Jake leaves...
I actually asked Mike to write this, so we should wait.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Mike is Sarah Argadale's boyfriend.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hi, Mike and
Classic
Sarah.
reader. Yeah. Classic pair of readers.
I like to think of couples listening to this podcast together.
It's charming, isn't it?
It's really sweet.
Yeah, they're the only ones. Right in.
Maybe there aren't. I don't know.
You don't think Greg makes
couples at idlethumbs.net. Send it in.
Don't do that. It won't go anywhere.
Yeah, that'll bounce.
That'll just make us seem like huge assholes.
Yeah.
Oh, right into couples, if there even are any. Send email undeliverable. Address does not exist. We're just assholes now. Okay. I'm looking at all these emails, and they all require Jake because they're all either about something Jake said or they're addressed to Jake.
Apparently we've lost the keystone. We can't. This whole thing is toppling. This is just.
There's one that starts off with just "Dear Jake, how do you do it?" In fact,
what?
I'm reading this now because
Are you sure that's not from Jake?
I want to read a complimentary email to Jake on top of all these other Jake-addressed emails we have here.
Let's get one out of the way.
Jude says, "Dear Jake, how do you do it?"
Wait a minute. This is Jude Jackson?
Oh, did we read this already?
No, but there's a separate Dota. All right. This is getting weird.
He says, how do you do it?
Read his email.
Every other episode or so, you accurately cross-reference each game or developer you talk about to the episode where it was first mentioned or interviewed on Idle Thumbs, listing not only the episode number, but also the title and the exact circumstances under which the episode is recorded. Quizzically, Jude.
Jake is feverishly Googling on his iPhone when somebody mentions something like Max Schaefer, and he goes, oh, he was on episode 29, light that ass up, or whatever.
You want to hear his P.S.? P.S. I assume you're just checking your phone. Also, you know what?
Also, Jake does just have a very catalog style. He can get to stuff very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Jake. That's
as long as he's not under emotional duress.
Sure. Yeah. Then he just shuts down.
Yeah. Then he just.
But I wanted to
falls into a heap.
Your crass reference to Torchlight. I wanted to. We sort of started to talk about. We never actually finished the thing you brought up where you were talking about the swapper and Gunpoint and why Gunpoint has been hovering up at the top of the Steam charts and the swapper hasn't. I know it was, but we've talked before. Not even just on this podcast, but Sean, you and I have talked about the name The Swapper and how neither of us likes it very much and how it was kind of off-putting to us.
It's not that I don't like it. It's just that it feels inappropriate.
Well, sure. That's what I mean. It's not inherently a terrible
I could think of a game called The Swapper.
Yeah.
That isn't this game.
Yeah, that's more what I meant. Sorry. Neither of us were crazy about it as a name for this particular game.
Yeah.
And
it's just so funny to see it come up in that very stark Futura font, all capital, The Swapper.
The Swapper, yeah. And we were talking about Gunpoint and how great of a name that is. You know, just how immediately assertive. You know, it's very strong.
The fulcrum of the entire design is encapsulated at the point of a gun, of the bullet that's going to come out and kill you if you fuck up.
Yeah.
And then later you can get a gun that you can use as a weapon to
you can pin guards down at gunpoint, basically. Yeah.
It's just really, really sharp.
Yeah.
As somebody who's terrible at naming things
is hard.
It's so fucking hard.
Really hard. And you just had Brad Muir on your podcast yesterday talking about Massive Chalice, which is one of my favorite names for anything in a while.
Yeah.
I love that name.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It has assonance. It is adjective, noun.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
It combines like a very kind of cliche fantasy word. Like chalice is one of those fantasy words that fantasy people always use to just make a normal thing sound like impressive. You know,
take that, fantasy people.
Fantasy people.
It's like it's like saying a flagon of mead. It's like, oh, come, like, oh, you know, it's just you hear it and you're like, all right, you just want this
sharpening
to sound
their
like
I know their broadsword.
I know, but by combining it with massive, it just creates this like almost tongue-in-cheek, like massive chalice. Like it's
not to be trifled with. Yeah. It's very concrete. Like it's really wonderful,
and it undercuts the kind of what I think it would be if it didn't have massive attached to it. But anyway,
when we were talking about good names the other day, I mean the ones that came up were like can't remember how we got into it, but Grim Fandango being another one of those just sort of just perfect.
So good. It just so encapsulates everything about the feeling of that game. And it's only in the game once in a super obscure place. That's okay.
Yeah.
And like Torchlight, I brought up because Torchlight is one of my favorite game names ever. I think it's amazing. You know, I guess the town in the game is called Torchlight, but I'm 95% certain they named the game before they named the town.
Even if they didn't, you hold on to that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's just wonderful. Like it creates the sense of like the solitary underground nature of the thing, but it also has a bit of a fairy tale feel to it, which the game totally. You know, you wouldn't call Diablo Torchlight, even though it's got a lot of the same shared qualities. Just super evocative, super great.
Yeah.
And I was saying this to you the other day. I'm sorry to have to repeat it to you, but to our readers, I haven't. Maybe I have. In fact, I probably have. I was reading there's an epilogue at the end of The Name of the Rose, which is the first novel by Umberto Eco, and like possibly his best novel. It's I'm a huge fan of his work, and that's one of his best. And it's a really great read. It was about his process writing this book, and just about a lot of just his general thoughts on literature and art and life, I guess. And it's just wonderful. And he talks about naming it The Name of the Rose, which is really interesting because if you read that book, the phrase "the name of the rose" does not appear in it, and there isn't anything. I don't know have either of you guys read that book?
No.
Okay, well that's okay. It's good though, but it doesn't. There's nothing like directly obvious about what that name has to do with the book, except that it feels appropriate. And he says in this epilogue that's why he chose it. It seemed like something that was appropriately evocative and appropriately believable in the context of this world, and somehow said something. I love the idea that to him it felt like it said something about the novel, even if he couldn't necessarily quantify exactly what. You know, I think that's a great thing about art, good art in general. You know, is a creator's ability to kind of intuit things like that, even if they couldn't map it on a flowchart and explain why this means that and this means that. You know, that's just something that I think is really wonderful and very elusive and difficult. But I thought that was great. Like naming things is definitely hard and an art unto itself.
Yeah.
I know that wasn't related to anything we were just talking about.
What was related to the original conversation about
Gunpoint like an hour ago?
Yeah.
But I can't remember why we brought it up just now.
The Swapper. Gunpoint.
Yeah.
One of those.
Two fantastic
One of those
games.
names is good.
For $20.
But they're both good games. Yeah.
Anyway.
You want to call it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right,
Thanks,
cool.
guys.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week. Fuck it. Thing there, but no. All right.
Rate us on iTunes. I assume that's what you're going to say.
No.
Oh.
Nope.
Video games.
I don't think you're ready for this jelly. I don't think you're ready for this. My body's so bootylicious.